Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar today on seamless security in a borderless world, a customer journey to achieving zero trust. I'm Nasreen Shams, Assistant Vice President of Business Development here at Stratagem. And for those of you who don't know about Stratagem yet, we are making a lot of waves in the industry. We are a next generation managed security services provider based right here out of Toronto, Ontario. We were recognized by Gartner this year for our managed SIM services and the skill and aptitude we have with integration and automation in the cyberspace. Our mission today in this webinar is to simplify the concept of zero trust and the implementation behind that as well. In essence, zero trust is where every connection is treated with suspicion until proven trustworthy. In the next hour, we have the privilege of learning more on this topic with some veterans in the space, including our partner in crime and a leader in the industry, Zscaler. A few key takeaways from the presentation today will be how to talk to Stratagem and Zscaler on the topics of the business case behind zero trust, how we can talk about this in a hybrid world, and also some security issues and how we can help walk through any challenges the team may have in scaling a zero trust implementation. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Brett James, our CTO in residence at Zscaler, to introduce himself and walk us through the rest of the webinar. Just a quick point before I hand it over, we will have a Q&A session. And also feel free to introduce any questions into the chat you may have. We're happy to walk you through right away. So Brett, floor is yours.
There we go. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. A little bit about me first before we jump into things. Like Nasreen said, I'm a CTO in residence at Zscaler. It's a bit of a funny title. At Essence, I act as an advisor, consultant, or maybe somewhat of an evangelist because of my experience in the industry, what I've done throughout the course of my career that's led up to this point of zero trust where everyone's talking about it today. I haven't worked on the vendor dark side before. I came over here in August of 21 through COVID. I wanted a bit of a life change, so I joined Zscaler, and I did that because I worked with them for a number of years, kickstarting the zero trust program at my previous company. And I had such a good relationship, not only with the account team, but with the product group as well. And I had this inherent trust of the technology and their visions that I decided to, see what it's like. And it's been a pretty refreshing change. As of going past all the pressures and the constant work on the operations side, but now I've get this very interesting angle where I can actually drive part of the product's direction. From my experience, I can help the company drive so it's more useful and more just better features for the customers to use. So prior to that, I was at Bechtel Corporation for 16 years, very large global engineering and construction company. When friends asked me what Bechtel did, I simply replied with saying that they built big things. Lots of airports, the Hoover Dam back in the day. And one of the most interesting projects, I think, was when we put the cover over the Chernobyl reactor in Russia. There's some very cool videos on YouTube where we managed the entire operation and were involved with it pretty soon after the disaster in the 80s. Throughout that time, I managed to get a taste of almost every single aspect of IT, except for really the database angle, desktop support, help desk, servers. In the end, I ended up as the head of enterprise architecture, where I was responsible for the application infrastructure so that we could build those big things that I talked about. Okay, so what are we talking about today? The topic at hand is the customer journey to achieving zero trust. And the way to really get through this properly, I think we've got to tackle these 4 items here. Firstly, why are we even talking about zero trust? What are the technology challenges and the goals of enterprises today that are forcing them to rethink about what they've done for the past 20 or 30 years from a network technology angle? I'll touch upon what Zero Trust is and who Zscaler is and how we're involved with it. The bulk of it, though, I think will be about how I did Zero Trust myself. Did is a bit of a funny term. We're undoing 20 to 30 years of infrastructure and technology and security as we tackle Zero Trust. No one's ever going to complete or do Zero Trust or complete it. It's going to be, I think, for this generation, a never-ending journey as we change those network security paradigms. And lastly, and probably the most important thing here, I think, is the lessons learned throughout this journey. As Nasreen said, if you've got any questions, just throw them in the chat. I like to keep these things fairly casual. Otherwise, at the end, we'll have a general Q&A session. We can go through those things as well. So to start things off, this is my really why I did something slide. We had a bunch of business challenges from the technical perspective. It was very complex to manage our environment. We had this very wide layer 3 broadcast domain. When I was in Australia working, I could manage the servers and the desktops in Iceland and Norway on some projects I was supporting there. Just do it directly across the network, access to file shares, RDP, you name it, I had it because it was my job. These days, it's not such an appropriate thing to do because of the challenges of ransomware, malware, etc. If I could do it easily, so can the attackers when our machines popped in the enterprise. It was all very expensive. It was all very CapEx heavy. Not really good in today's economic conditions. The infrastructure and the security was really incompatible with our visions of the cloud. I'll touch on that a little bit later on. And also user performance was poor. And the reason it was poor because, you know, around 2011, 2012, security got really serious in the industry. We had some experiences with ourselves where we were very wide, and then pretty much overnight we installed these very large security stacks in 4 or 5 data centers around the world. All the traffic was hairpinned, and the effect of that was cloud really became unusable in certain parts of the world. So when I was in Australia, Office 365 just wasn't usable because I was hairpinning up to Singapore and back again, which really isn't flash when our data centers in, or the Office 365 tab, mind you, was in East US. We had security challenges, but we had, I think, a very good handle on them because of our security teams. They were world class. They would win black hat competitions with this very hard shell around our perimeter. But if anything got inside, it was sort of fair game for those people that got inside. But then we were very good at detecting that. Here we had, it was very wide, lots of lateral movement risk when that happened. So it was very expensive also from a resourcing perspective to do what we needed to do. We did have some of the top APT groups after us because of our work with the US government, work with nuclear technology, etc., etc. And here's great. You know, as security got more and more serious, we had more appliances, more agents, more centralization, and the user performance there sucked. I love South Park. If you haven't seen the Underpants Gnomes episode, I really highly suggest. It's related to the story because it was a good metaphor for our cloud goals. Cloud was going to fix all of our problems. It was going to allow us to flex up and down as the business required us to. We were going to close data centers. We were not going to own any hardware. When a project finished, we'd just turn off those resources. You know, we didn't have to make that capital investment. Life was going to be good. And on the left here is what the Underpants Gnome strategy was. Migrate everything to the cloud, or in their case, steal underpants, ? And in the end, we'll profit. That number 2 is what I think really defines a lot of companies' cloud strategies. They think they're going to get something out of it, but they don't quite know how to get there. Cloud is a challenge for applications. when they used to be on-prem, have direct access to those applications on the network, moving them to the cloud. It's a completely different paradigm. I keep saying the word paradigm. It truly is different than what it used to be. You can't do cloud-based applications without changing the architecture, not just the applications, but the way you access those things as well. IT's goal today, well, IT goals yesterday was to support the business. We would provide the service, we'd build up the infrastructure, build the network so that the applications could run. These days, it's changed to enabling the business. Allow other companies to use things like ChatGPT, data lakes, AI and ML. You want to use cloud to streamline the operations. Stop building and providing these services, except now we've got to consume those services. That was our goal as a company anyway, to streamline the operations. COVID, everyone jumped on the VPN, work from anywhere in bandwagon when COVID took over. Everyone demands now that modern workplace experience. Now that COVID has finished, some companies are forcing the return back to the office. Many are keeping this hybrid workplace experience going. They've got to be able to still provide those services without reducing their security posture. Okay, so what is Zero Trust? NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, it's a US-based agency, I guess managed by the US government. There is a really good document that they published, 800-207. It's the white paper. If you haven't read it and you're interested in doing Zero Trust, I highly suggest doing it. It was only 57 pages long. It gives you a good vendor-neutral understanding of what Zero Trust is. But I think most importantly, it's a framework. It's a set of guiding principles for workflow. And this is one of the lines from the white paper that describes what Zero Trust is. It's a set of guiding principles to design an architecture to improve the security posture. That changes from what we've done for the past 20 or 30 years. To talk about it really succinctly here, Zero Trust, it's not just more firewalls. It is really re-architecting, doing everything different than what we have done in the past. Really good way to describe it, I think. I'm not very good at my artwork, but this does a pretty good job of explaining, where think of this circle as your office. Maybe before COVID, this was the office. If you were on the network, within that corporate network, you had this element of trust to access those applications. Those employees were trusted not to go poking around in things they weren't supposed to, like ports. They weren't going to try to log on to RDP because the HR person isn't going to anyway because it's not their job. The idea was that the security team would make sure that there wasn't malware on the machine so that it couldn't spread laterally throughout the environment. Well, the Zero Trust definition in terms of my shoddy artwork here, it really takes to reduce that circle of trust down to each and every single asset or resource or device, person or camera, whatever it is within your environment, reduces that bubble there so that you have to get this explicit trust to access something before you can do it. If you want a little bit more of a technical explanation, on the left here, everyone could ping, touch or toggle anything in the enterprise. They could touch and fill things out. On this side here, you can't even ping a device. You won't even see that it's there until you've got explicit authorization to do so. Makes sense to everyone, I hope. This is a diagram from that Zero Trust publication. And there's a couple of points here I want to point out. Firstly, most companies these days have probably 80% of the technology required to start implementing a Zero Trust architecture. Most people have a SIM. Everyone's got their identity and access management systems. You've got antivirus, EDR. You've got PKI probably. You've got threat intelligence, whether it's yourself doing it or you've got third parties or maybe SaaS services are using that threat intelligence to help do that protection. You've got that already, so it's not the biggest lift in the world to start implementing zero trust. What is a little bit different here, though, is what I've got pictured in the middle. You've got this policy enforcement point at the bottom, the gateway. If you think about maybe a VPN concentrator for the people coming from the outside world, it's not entirely different. It's a choke point for you to let traffic through. But the top here, the policy decision point, is what changes everything. This is what uses all this context, all this information coming in from those other systems to make an intelligent decision to allow this user or this device or whatever it is to access this enterprise resource based on those conditions. It could be, have they got antivirus? Is it domain joined? Is it a machine Windows domain joined? What location? Are they coming in from the US, from the continental North American continent? What time of day is it? Is it normal for them to be logging at 3 o'clock in the morning? Are they only accessing a file share like in the HR user? Well, go for it. We will let that traffic through. But if it's 3 a.m., it's coming from China and they're trying to access an RDP or an SSH port, well, no, sorry, that isn't allowed. And that's where things are very different from the VPN aspect. Again, to go back to the bit of more technical, this system will never be able to touch or ping or do anything to this enterprise resource until there's that explicit authorization given. Now, what's different from what has been done in the past to what we're talking about today is this is for everywhere. This isn't just for your remote users. This is for when the users are in the office, at work, the hotel, at Starbucks, whatever. It's the same policies, it's the same architecture, it's the same technologies. A really good benefit of this comes then to user experience. It's going to be the same way they access their applications no matter where they are, home, office, or the coffee shop. I'm sure everyone knows about Gartner. They call this, this is what SSE is for them, the Secure Services Edge. Just that box around the middle, Zero Trust, SSE, it's those terms can be used pretty much interchangeably. Again, if you have any questions, want me to touch upon anything further, just please throw them in the chat. Now, coming back to the story a little bit, it took me about 2 years to really figure out what the Zero Trust thing is after we invested in Zscaler. On the left-hand side, again, was what we were doing. The right-hand side is a picture that we drew about 6 months before I left the company. And it's supposed to represent what the network was going to look at once we had finished this vision, where instead of having this big, wide layer 3 broadcast domain, it's complex to manage, we were doing our own BGP routing internally. The right-hand side is each device, workload, data center. It's all operating logically independently, and their first point of call for any application or resource access was going to be this policy enforcement point. In my case, it was the Zscaler cloud. User goes to our cloud-based service. It does those policy authorizations, and only once they are succeeded, it lets that traffic through to the destination, whether that be a cloud service, Office 365, something in Azure, or something on-premise in the data center. Now, it isn't just a cloud-based service. If there are applications with low latency or high bandwidth requirements, you can effectively bring the Zscaler cloud onto your environment. So there's the same point-to-point performance connectivity, but you're still able to use those same zero trust policies to protect your resources. Whenever I talk to customers or prospects or anyone really around zero trust, I always impress upon the importance of having a moonshot vision. This long-term vision that your company is going to be aiming towards to suit the business requirements, your security requirements, your challenges, because what's different, again, what we've been doing over the past 20, 30 years, you can't just put a new box to the data center, turn it on, and off you go. This is truly an architectural wholesale change to what you're doing. And if you don't have this vision, you are at risk of painting yourself into a corner, in my opinion. Okay, to talk about how I did it. There's a lot of content here. Again, this is where I think our customers get a lot of the value out of this. Throw any questions you've got in the chat panel there, because it's very hard to do on your own, but there is a lot of information out there. You wouldn't be the first person doing Zero Trust. Like I said, it took me about 2 years to really figure it out, and it's one of the reasons that my position exists today, is to help customers really accelerate that understanding and how their business is going to benefit from it. So it's very important first, I think, to do a pilot. You gotta learn what to do before you jump in and start making the changes, making these architectural decisions. And then when you do, a really good way to think about starting Zero Trust is to start from the outside. Another good metaphor is around having that big wide circle of trust, like I had in that global diagram, and just keep working iteratively to reduce that trust down. And your remote users are going to be the furthest away in that room. Your typical VPN users, replace those people with a Z10A connection. Zero Trust, Zscaler, one of the competitors. Everyone has that same basic Z10A functionality. Get your remote users connected in and give them access to only the resources that they require to do their job. Once that's done, you can start looking at the people when they're on premise. Instead of maybe backhauling traffic through to centralized security stacks, combine Zscaler, like a secure web gateway component, with your SD-WAN. Get your users when they're in the office going out locally through the pulse enforcement point to their internet resource, whether it's SaaS or just local general internet browsing. Get that web inspection going, make sure that they're not downloading any malware. It's very hard to do that when you aren't looking at the traffic, looking at the payloads, and stopping those bad things as they come in. In the past, before we jumped into this kind of method, we were doing individual blacklists, which they're very hard to manage. It's not very quick it's very hard to keep up with demand. So at those 2 points, we were getting remote protection for our users. It was an always-on security protection for the users. Before, with VPN, if they turned VPN off, that user's traffic was invisible to us. It wasn't getting logged. So therefore, it was a big risk when they brought that machine into the office and plugged in, because there's a period of time we just didn't know what was going on. You've got that performance. There was no hairpinning, because they were always traversing through to the closest point of presence. And then when they were in the office, they always had that secure direct internet access. And it was at that point, actually, we were looking at, or we were replacing expensive MPLS or dark fiber links with just commodity broadband. Start to reduce our costs, start using the internet as our backbone. Those 2 things, I think, were relatively easy to start enabling those users. But then after that, to get that picture that I had before around using the Zscaler backbone, or Zscaler as the backbone, that's where you need to have that vision. You need to have some real technical know-how to start doing it, to start enabling your applications for you at Zero Trust. When you do that, you reduce the exposure, you hide your applications from those that are not authorized to use it. You can start protecting, I think, more your cloud-based IaaS environments, without having, again, to hairpin through your local network. We decommissioned VPN. So to get access to our environment, no one could actually see our VPN concentrators because they just weren't there. The users would connect to Zscaler, and then from there they were handed off to those applications. We started to turn our external exposure dark. We were becoming invisible to the internet, and when you become invisible, it's very hard for the attackers to do anything. And it was at this point as well we were doing secure B2B access, meaning we wouldn't have to open applications to the internet specifically for a certain partner. We wouldn't have to do special firewall rules, make the environment more complex to provide that access. And we were also, because this is all based on identity, not just getting a user or device on the network to access those applications, we were able to start a BYOID program, bring your own identity. So our partners would log into our applications, our on-premise applications, with their own identities, much like you would share a document with OneDrive or Teams, or join a meeting with your corporate identity. That was opening up a world of possibilities and really making things more efficient and easier for our third parties and our joint venture partners. After we started down that process, then we, in parallel, started looking at our office redesign project. Like these are all ongoing. They're still ongoing today. Like I said, you're not going to finish this in overnight. It's not a big bang approach. You take things iteratively. You're transforming the way you've done things for the past 20, 30 years. The office redesign, a really good way to talk about this is just having guest Wi-Fi in the office, and that's it. You're just using the network as a transport mechanism for the applications. You're not using it as a security or an authorization part of the application service. It's just a transport mechanism, using that to get to the Zscaler cloud to access those applications. And some of the benefits from there was rapid mobilization. We could stand up a new office very quickly, especially when we were in some of the harder places in the world, in Africa or the Middle East, where it can be difficult to get equipment in, difficult and timely. Same thing when our users were working on client sites. Start up the Zscaler. Well, it's the Zscaler service is always on, so they just need to get guest Wi-Fi access at that client partner's location, and then they've got access to their applications. It just made things very easy. And then for us, cloud and data center was the last piece of the puzzle, where instead of trying to shoehorn applications to the cloud using very old network security paradigms, it was doing cloud properly, as I say, having these little pockets of subnets of resources that are completely disconnected. And the only way to get to those resources or other applications was to go through a ZTNA service. We hadn't started that by the time I left the company, but that was all built into that vision, where everything's first logical hop was to the Zscaler cloud. Okay, like I said, any questions, please throw them in the chat, or we can save them to the end, but I will move on. So the lessons here, I think this is very, very important to understand these things, because the tech part is easy. That's the easiest part of a journey towards zero trust. It's all the other third-party aspects that I had troubles with and everybody else has to make this journey. Transform iteratively. It's not a big bang, but also, like I said before, don't do it on your own. Whether it's research on your own through the internet, maybe you're looking at customer journey stories, references. You might be talking to someone at an event, like Vanta or a Gartner event. Or maybe you're at, I just came back from AWS reInvent, Microsoft Ignite, or Zscaler's own user conference, Zenith Live. A bunch of people there are doing it already. Talk to them, find out how they did it. Don't just trust a vendor. Talk to people that have already done it. You really need to do that. Otherwise, it will take you much longer, not to learn it, but also to do it. Just don't do it on your own. There are lots of frameworks out there now. NIST has one, like I said before. DoD has one. I'm in the US, so I'm used to talking about these things. DoD, NSA, the CSA group, the Cloud Security Alliance. I'm a member of that, and I do some work with their cloud information there. They've got a brilliant framework on how to implement, but they're all very similar. They operate on these pillars, help you understand where you are today, understand what your goals are, and then map out a journey for yourself on how to get there. Partnership. Now this is moving towards more an internal focus here. When I was doing this, I had so many naysayers, especially from the security team, which can be surprising to hear. I was on the enterprise architecture side of things. I needed to use cloud to do what I needed to do what the business asked me to do. I could not do that with our current architecture setup. Our security team was very comfortable with what they were doing. They were very good at what they were doing. And here was me asking them to change how they do security. It was a very difficult conversation. But I used the business value of cloud to help the organization save money and be more flexible to trump the naysayers. I said to them, okay, don't give me a Zscaler, that's fine, but I need 12 security stacks around the world to be able to use cloud, and they just we're not able to do that because of the resources and the money it would cost to perform that. But that's how I got Zscaler on the door. You'll have a different experience. Point is, use the business to help you with this journey, because that's why we're all doing IT in the first place, right? Cloud culture is big too. Like I said, doing cloud in the old-fashioned way, firewalls, routers, NAC, you can't do cloud that way. It's just too difficult. Agent fatigue is interesting. To do zero trust, no matter what vendor you're using, you need a zero trust agent to do it. I first didn't want to throw another agent. I already had 6 or 7 at one time. I spoke to a customer about 6 months ago. He had the record. He had about 12 different agents. And depending on who was doing the work, they had 9 different VPN agents. They were interacting with third parties, but they had 9 different VPN type agents to do his job, and I just laughed. I couldn't do anything but laugh and feel sorry for the guy. But when you're trying to protect this model that assumes trust when you're on the network, you need all these agents to get visibility of what's going on, to be reactive to something bad happening. When you start moving to a zero trust architecture, it's more proactive. You will be able to replace or consolidate agents, because the authorization, the security to get access to those resources is all done in real time. It's not after the fact. It's not trying to detect something and then report on it after. It gets done at the time of access, and it's continually happening through that access. By getting all these systems integrated, you can reduce that agent list that you might have today. This is an interesting as well, because it's a balance. I say hybrid approaches can be painful. Consider the transition from the old environment to your new environment, and map that out intelligently. Like I said, you can't do a big bang. It has to be done in an iterative process. A lot of things can be done in parallel. Some things only in serial. But continuing to do something or have some policy in place because we've always done it that way is, in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons for failure. Some of the more, let's say, not policy, rule-based industries can be very hard for this. Banking, finance, insurance, where they've got these policies and regulations they need to follow. There can be some some people in the organization that just refuse to budge. We've always done it this way. It's going to be too hard to change that. I'm going to have to rewrite policy. I'm going to have to do whatever it takes, 3 months. It could be a 6-month journey to get something changed. I was talking to one bank. It took them 3 years to roll out the Microsoft Teams client across all 132 companies that they operated in. 3 years, and that was just voice and meetings. It took them that long because each country lawyers had to approve the use of this new application. I'm sure that could have been done a whole lot more easier way, because from what I'm told, that was just their internal processes and procedures. If you were, if they were to try to do that with some of this zero trust stuff, that's just a recipe for maybe not failure, but a massive delay to the implementation of something as different as what this is. The message here, don't blindly adhere to existing policies. Yeah, be prepared to change policies because they need to fit this new model. A lot of those policies just won't fit the old model. This is one of my favorite ones, prepared to meet or re-meet the sins of the past. There'll be some skeleton in the closet that you get discovered. For me, there were some GPOs that no one knew what they did, really, why they were there. You could figure out what they did, but why they were there. There were some applications that they were only used by IP addresses because they refused to trust DNS. You will find these things and you will break things. There's no question about that. So be prepared to have those things happen, and don't be discouraged by it. Things will break because, again, I keep harping on this point. You're changing 20 to 30 years of network security architecture. There's no way you're going to do this smoothly. So the business needs to be aware of why you're doing it, the risks, but also the benefits at the end of doing it. Don't be discouraged. That is my main message here. Okay, that was pretty much it. I can talk for hours on this topic. I've only got about 40 minutes or so it's pretty abridged. Happy to take some Q&A, some comments here. If you think of something later, catch me on LinkedIn or maybe even just send me an email. Nasreen, back to you.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. Love the presentation you had, and also the ability for you to kind of talk about it from a real world experience. The fact that you've implemented this, done it on the ground, tactically, strategically, and from the business perspective, you're right, that is kind of maybe the hardest piece to convince at the top. So if anyone on this call is listening and needs help kind of building the business case around that, we love helping our clients or prospects with that as well. So feel free to engage us. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I do have one here for you, Brett. I'm going to read it out. So considering the dynamic nature of cyber threats, how frequently does Zscaler update its threat intelligence, and what proactive measures are in place to stay ahead of emerging threats?
Yeah, it's an interesting environment we're living in today, where there's new threats every day, new countries, new APT groups getting in on the action. I remember back when I was young, you'd be new viruses coming out, and you'd get those viruses, by swapping disks, pirating games and stuff that I was doing as a kid. That's different than today. Today, we are updating our intelligence continuously during the day. We have feeds from at least 40 or 42 different partners, I think, whether they're government or just industry bodies like Microsoft. We get those feeds and we update them continually. I think it was like up to 200,000 updates a day that can be put out. And because it's a true cloud multi-tenant infrastructure, everyone gets those immediately. It's not like a firewall rule where you set the rule, push the button, and then it's got to spend time to deploy it everywhere. It's just natural as part of the architecture.
Excellent. And I have another question here. So this is from a prospective customer. So they're curious about the scalability of Zscaler's solution, and they're asking, can you provide insights on how well Zscaler adapts to the growth of an organization, especially in terms of numbers and network expansion?
Yeah, so I touched upon it before, a true multi-tenant cloud architecture. What that means is that it is a single service. What we don't do is spin up environments for individual customers. So when you subscribe to us, you can have a new tenant, just like an Office 365 tenant, within minutes. It's not a little bit of history here. When I first started getting into SaaS/PaaS services, we were moving from our on-premise mail gateway service to a cloud-based service. It was all very cutting edge, they said, and it took them 2 days to spin up the environment. It really was just servers. They were hosting servers in the cloud for our gateway, essentially the exact same service that we hosted on-prem. That wasn't cloud to me. That was just outsourcing the service to someone to look over, and that's I think a very good metaphor for what we do. It is just like Hotmail. You get a new account immediately. It's not a single service there. That's what Zscaler is. So we're this true service that spans the cloud, 150 data center pops, and we run our own data centers. We don't use AWS or Azure for our core services. We will use them to expand and contract if there is a bit of flexibility required. That there's this great graph we've got internally when COVID happened, and our traffic went like this. I think it was like March 16 or 17. Well, we expanded out to Azure and AWS through network traffic, and then we contracted as we got that traffic, or the resources rather, within our own data centers to take on that traffic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brett. So as we close up today, I'm just going to go to the final screen here. If you'd like to connect with either myself or Brett, these are our QR codes to our LinkedIn pages. Please feel free to reach out, even if you're just on the early, the very beginning journeys of engaging in Zero Trust and just want to talk, just want to hear the insights that Stratagem and Zscaler have. We're more than welcome to, contact us for one of those calls. And lastly, we'll be sending a recording of this session to everybody that joined today and everyone that didn't. So in the future, you can go back to this and make any notes and references as needed. But with that being said, I want to thank you for your time, Brett. I know you're a very busy person, and we appreciate the wealth of knowledge you've helped us with here today, and you've helped us simplify the concept. So thanks again, and I want to wish everybody a great rest of your afternoon. Hope to hear from you on LinkedIn soon.